Did you know that absinthe was originally a medicine? In the late 1700s and early 1800s, wormwood-based spirits were used as remedies for stomach problems, fevers, and parasites. But absinthe didn't gain its popularity in the pharmacy. See, French soldiers stationed in Algeria in the 1800s were given absinthe as a cure for all sorts of diseases and to add to their poor water. When those soldiers returned home to France, they brought that acquired taste with them. By the late 1800s, absinthe had exploded all over France, especially the cafés in Paris. It was so popular that every evening at 5 p.m. became known as the Green Hour. One could find cafés filled with writers, poets, painters, actors, and other bohemians dripping ice water into glowing green glasses. Painters like Degas and Van Gogh became associated with absinthe. Oscar Wilde wrote about absinthe. It was a symbol for excess, rebellion, creativity, and sometimes self-destruction. By the time 1900 rolled around, newspapers and doctors were blaming absinthe for pretty much everything you can imagine. The biggest turning point leading to absinthe ban across the world was in 1905. In Switzerland, a man, if you even want to call him that after you hear this story, named Jean Lanfray, was accused and found guilty of committing some terrible crimes. After a day filled with drinking, he went home and he murdered his pregnant wife and his 2 young daughters. Newspapers focused heavily on the fact that he had been consuming absinthe that day. But what they left out is that early that morning at the crack of dawn, he began drinking everything that he could get his hands on, and absinthe was just a small part of that. But of course, the story exploded across Europe, and suddenly, absinthe wasn't the drink of artists anymore. It was public enemy number 1. Countries started banning absinthe one by one. First Belgium, and then Switzerland, and then the United States, and finally, even France banned absinthe. So by 1915, it was pretty much outlawed everywhere. Fast forward to today, and modern research suggests that all of these old stories were exaggerated, at least when it comes to absinthe role in them. Now, absinthe does contain thujone, which is a compound that comes from wormwood. For years, people believed that this compound, in the amounts found in absinthe, were able to cause hallucinations and outright insanity in a lot of cases. But modern testing does show that there's not a substantial enough amount of thujone in most absinthe to really cause any effect whatsoever. In the late 1900s and early 2000s, regulators started to lift the bans because they realized that the old science didn't hold up. Today, absinthe is legal throughout much of the world, including the United States, although thujone levels are still carefully regulated.
Hi, do you want to buy wine, but you don't want to go outside? Well, now you can do that. And you can buy wine, and you don't have to go outside. Go to empirewine.com, 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 and you don't have to go outside.
Now that absinthe is legal, it's pretty easy to find in the United States. But what does it actually taste like? The dominant flavor in absinthe is usually licorice or anise. The wormwood, still an essential ingredient in absinthe, adds an element of bitterness and some texture. It's that bitter herbal backbone that stops it from tasting candy sweet. A good absinthe will have that anise balanced out by herbaceousness, stuff like mint, fennel, and other kind of alpine herbs. And of course, there's the ritual. Traditionally, you'll be dripping ice-cold water over a sugar cube suspended above the glass. This really softens the flavor, lengthens it out just a touch, and changes the entire experience. So here's 4 producers that are leading the way with the absinthe revival going on in the United States right now. First, we'll look at Lucid. Lucid was one of the first genuine absinthes legally sold in the United States after it was made legal again in the early 2000s. It's produced in France using traditional recipes and a traditional distillation method. If you're looking for an ultra-classic style of absinthe, this is it. An American producer that's been doing great things with absinthe since it became legal again is St. George. St. George takes a different approach than traditional European producers. The botanicals they use are a little bit more unusual when you consider what's classically found in the ingredients list for absinthe. Mint, basil, and tarragon sit alongside the wormwood and create a more earthy style of absinthe than you'll find across the pond. Now, one of the most well-known and historic producers of absinthe is Pernod. Pernod was one of the original producers of absinthe during the big boom during the Belle Epoque era. When absinthe was banned, the company pivoted and created other anise-based spirits. But since its re-legalization in the early 2000s, Pernod has returned to its roots and is widely available. And finally, one of the most recognizable brands of absinthe in the world is Absinthe. It's the most recognizable because it uses that Van Gogh motif right on the box. Because it is marketed for the masses and not necessarily the absinthe nerds, it is a little bit softer and sweeter than a lot of the other stuff out there, but that also makes it a great starting point for those who are just curious about absinthe. As an added bonus, it comes with a little absinthe spoon, which you can use to reconstruct the old absinthe ritual right in your own home. So I urge everyone who's curious to try one of these bottles out. It's a delicious spirit, it's unique, and like I said, the history is there, which to me always makes a spirit a lot more interesting. Anyway, that's going to be it for me this week. Don't forget to share this video with a friend because absinthe's a lot better when you're doing that ritual with someone else. Adios!